There we are. Welcome to the Matchbook Weekend Football Podcast. It's your weekend football punting preview. I'm joined by Mark O'Hare from We Love Betting and also Adrian Clarke, former footballer, current football broadcasting legend. Guys, Adrian, you weren't on last week. Matt Scott joined us and we continued where you left off last time you were on because, probably the most exciting and eye-catching winner of the season for the Weekend Football Pod. Borussia Mönchengladbach were banged on about by Mark O'Hare, banged on about by Matt Scott. They were just under 6-1 to beat Bayern Munich. And they did so in the last minute with a penalty. That was a very, very welcome result and a very exciting one as well. This week, we're going to get into some Premier League action. The games are coming thick and fast. We're going to talk about Arsenal, Man City, Wolves, Tottenham, Man United, Everton, and Southampton, West Ham as well. One thing to flag up before we get into the insight and the action is that now on the Matchbook site, it is possible to put an accumulator on, a multi, previously unavailable, but now very much possible. And someone, the most ridiculous thing, that probably the most ridiculous winner since they introduced ACCAs on the site. Last weekend, someone had an ACCA at just under 9,000 to 1. So 8,854.3, tenfold ACCA, which included some draws, which included an over 3 goals punt. You've got prices at 1.6 that you can see on screen if you're watching us live now. But you also had a 6.14 winner in the Zweite Bundesliga, a ridiculous winner. And the best part was he had 5p on. He or she, I should say, had 5p on. £442.50 winner at 8,853 to 1. So if you fancy something like that, then have a listen today. You can build an ACCA on the Matchbook site. If you go to the site, you'll see ACCAs on the right-hand side, and you can start building something this weekend. But let's get into the action. Adrian, we'll start with Arsenal, Man City. It's the biggest game of the weekend, you have to say. And Arsenal are at home here, available at 6.4 on the Matchbook site as we record on Thursday mornings. Man City, 1.46. The draw, 5.6. Arsenal plus 1.25 goals, 1.99 currently, and Man City minus 1.25 goals, 1.943. Over 3.5 goals. No surprise to see that goal line nice and high. Over 3.5 is 1.943, and the under 1.96. So, Adrian, good to have you on because Arsenal played a brilliant 15 minutes of football earlier on this week for the first time in a while. Hello. That's exciting, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it was a relief to me, let me tell you, because I have to analyse all the games, and it's been a challenge of late. So it was just nice to pick the bones out of a victory. As you rightly point out, they played fantastically for a 15. I would argue 30. Okay, for the first 59 minutes, Arsenal were poor. It was pretty dismal. They were just going sideways, backwards. They looked like a team that were lacking confidence. And then it clicked. They scored a goal out of nowhere, Martinelli, and suddenly the confidence came back coursing through their veins. And it was pretty impressive, actually. The caveat, I think, has to be that was one of the most shambolic West Ham performances I've ever seen, really. I think it's the sort of performance that gets managers the sack. So if I'm a punter, I'm not getting too swept away by that win, especially with Manchester City around the corner, who have their flaws. We know that. But I would still lean strongly towards Manchester City. Have a brilliant record in London, won 10 of the last 11. And they're fast starters, and Arsenal are not fast starters. They tend to concede the first goal a lot of the time. So if I was to have a bet on this game, I'd probably, and it pains me to say this, I'd probably be looking at the City to be leading at half time and also winning the game eventually. The City bet is where I'd be going, probably with the overs as well. But look, Arsenal do have more confidence today than they did on Tuesday. So you never quite know.
Mark, what do you think about City at the moment? In their last 5 games, they've lost 2, to Manchester United and Liverpool. That's the last 5 league games, I should say. They also drew with Newcastle and beat Chelsea and Burnley. They're a fair way off Liverpool now. Is the air of superiority starting to slip with this Man City side? And is that backed up by their performances, or have they been a bit unlucky recently?
I think luck has definitely played a part. Maybe not last week. I thought, we'll get on to Manchester United later, but I think they were very well beaten in that first half. They conceded 9 counter-attacks in transition in the first half an hour alone. We've known about their defensive errors, but the lack of kind of intensity around their midfield and pressing game, which we've become accustomed to over the last sort of 2 years under Pep Guardiola's leadership, just wasn't there. And I think before the Man United match, I was very much in favour of City keeping this title race alive. But now the gap is 14 points. I think the stat was that City need to win every game now between the end of the season, and Liverpool must drop as many points in their last 22 games as they have in their previous 44 to see City overturn them. So you'd have to say the title race probably is done now. Pep Guardiola's future, speculations been talking about this week, which I guess is expected after the run they've been on. But he's been very moody, very tetchy, very irritable with his dealings with the press. I guess that's no change really, but the fact is his team aren't really getting the results and performances to match those moods. So, I look at them. Yeah, luck has definitely played a part, so have injuries, but so is their failure to address that defence and failure on Guardiola's part to sort out that defence. They look so vulnerable out of possession. They do dominate the ball, create many, many chances, but defensively there's massive question marks. And I think Arsenal will look at this game, look what United did last week in the first half alone, and believe they got an opportunity here. United were 8-1 to win that match at the Etihad. Arsenal is 6.3 here, which is the biggest price at home since Arsene Wenger left the club. The previous biggest price was 4.33 when City came here in Unai Emery's first game in charge. So that's a big difference. And I guess the caveat, like Adrian said about Arsenal's win against West Ham on Monday, is I still don't think Arsenal are a very good team at the minute. And whilst that match against West Ham might have raised spirits and raised confidence, there's still no hiding place to what they've achieved in the previous kind of 2-3 months. So it's actually a really difficult game for me to kind of analyse, knowing where these two teams are mentally as well as physically and with the quality on the field.
Let's bring Adrian back in here. Mark's talked about a potential blueprint set by Manchester United last week against City. You have to defend very resolutely, of course, and you have to do that for large periods. But in terms of the players on the counter-attack, which last week, Rashford, Martial, James, on paper at least, they haven't always been performing, but on paper, Arsenal do have players that could have some joy with space to play into.
Absolutely, yeah. If he sticks with the same front three, Pepe played fantastically. Martinelli has goals in his blood. He's a natural predator, and Aubameyang up top. We know about his quality, especially on the counter. Arsenal are a counter-attacking side. The difference, I think, is that Manchester United's back four last weekend was much more robust than Arsenal's will be this weekend. They could absorb that pressure. Harry Maguire and Lindelof have formed a good partnership. At the moment, it's Chambers and Socrates. They did okay, but it's not as strong. The problem for me is at fullback, Maitland-Niles isn't a natural fullback. Kolasinac loves to bomb on, and you think about City down the sides with Sterling, with Mahrez, whoever they choose to pick, Bernardo Silva. It's concerning, and I do think that's the big difference. Arsenal will hurt City on the counter. I'm confident of it. I'm not as confident they'll be able to absorb the pressure in the way that United did.
Mark, Adrian reckons that a City half-time, full-time type punt might be the one to go if he had to. Have you got anything for the listeners, an official team matchbook selection here?
Well, yeah, on Arsenal, Adrian's actually bang on there about them defensively as well. And I have concerns about their midfield as well. Lucas Torreira, I don't think he is a sitting midfielder. He likes to get forward and influence the attack. And Granit Xhaka's never going to keep the back four covered himself. So they could get overstretched there. They could get overstretched in the wide areas too. And I do expect City to win this game. I think City to win and both teams to score is probably the most likely scenario to me. But I wouldn't put anyone off backing over 3.5 goals. It has seen money this week. It was around even money. It's come into about 1.94, I think, now. Obviously, both teams so well stocked in attacking areas. But City without a clean sheet in 10 now, if you include their second team at Zagreb in midweek, 2 clean sheets in 8 away Premier League games. Arsenal, as we know, are notoriously flaky in defensive areas. But they do tend to put up a decent fight when they host the big teams at the Emirates. They've got a very good home record. Interestingly, the two teams, Arsenal when hosting Big Six and Chelsea City away to the Big Six since the start of last season. Matches haven't been kind of full of goals, but I'd be surprised if this one doesn't feature a few. And I think the closer over 3.5 goals gets to 1.9. The closer, I'm not interested in it. But at the moment, I think it is probably a small bet. But it's very difficult to find real good value in this game because it's so lopsided. And obviously the market's completely anticipating a bit of a goal glut too. So, yeah, I think goals and City are the way to play.
Okie doke. Let's go on to our second game to preview ahead of the weekend. It's Wolves against Spurs. This one's on Sunday afternoon, 2:00 kickoff at the Molineux, and it's 3.28 if you fancy Wolves at home here against Spurs, 2.29 the away side, Tottenham Hotspur, and the draw 3.54. Wolves plus a quarter of a goal, 1.96, and Spurs minus a quarter of a goal, 1.97. The goal line over 2.5 is 1.94 and under 2.5, 1.96. So quite an interesting game to get our teeth into here, I think. Mark, I'll ask you first. We're a few games now into the Mourinho era at Spurs. From a punter's perspective or analysing this team, any early signs, whether it's the strength of the team or in punting terms, how the goal expectancy is looking in their games? What are the early signs for Mourinho Spurs?
Well, it's interesting because I think the results haven't actually matched what Mourinho's wanted. I think before the game against Burnley, he was talking to the press about how the clean sheet and improving defence was really, really key. They obviously kept that clean sheet against Burnley, had conceded 8 goals in his first 4 games. He said cutting out the basic errors and conceding sloppy goals was absolutely pivotal to turning their season around. And there was a slight improvement to that game against Burnley in defensive areas, but they still conceded opportunities. Rodriguez had 2 good headed chances. Sanchez had to block from Chris Wood on the line as well when the ball hit the bar. So I think that should encourage Wolves at least, who have scored in all but 2 games across 4 competitions this season. Quite a remarkable record considering their schedule. But in terms of Mourinho's team, it's quite interesting, really, because he's set up with the same back 4, really, and I think in 4 of his 5 games, if we exclude the game against Bayern Munich, which was obviously a much changed team. But Vertonghen at the left, Aurier at right back, Sanchez and Alderweireld in the centre of the park. I'm not too fond of it myself. I don't really like Vertonghen on the left of a back 4. I know it's kind of switches into a back 3 when Aurier gets forward, but Sanchez is an accident waiting to happen to me. And then in midfield, he really likes Dyer. Dyer's been kind of the mainstay in that holding role. Sissoko played there last week. I think the balance of the team was pretty decent with those two, but I think Winks is fit this weekend. So, but again, that area of the field is a concern for me for Spurs, the balance of that midfield. So yeah, but I guess the forward line, it picks itself really, and he's picked the same 4 week in, week out, and all 4 of them have been in fantastic form. Kane, Ali, and particularly Son last week as well. So I guess from a team selection, we kind of know what to expect now. And Mourinho, whilst I know this sort of topic has been branded around many times, is he a defensive coach or not? But he does like to keep his team solid at the back, and I think that's definitely what he's been looking for. He got it last week against Burnley. Whether he'll get it at Wolves this weekend, I'm not so sure. Very
tricky fixture this, isn't it, Adrian? Because while Wolves this season has included 9 draws, a league high, remarkable, from 16 games, actually they haven't lost since the 14th of September, that home defeat against Chelsea. It's a long unbeaten run with a lot of draws and plenty of wins in there as well. It's hard not to be pretty impressed with a side that's coping on so many fronts and getting results as well.
Yeah, look, Nuno is a good manager, isn't he? He knows exactly what he's doing. No, I've been really impressed, not least because they've had a makeshift defence. The back 3, which was pretty much picked itself for 18 months, has had to be reshuffled, and they've brought other people in. Bolly's been out, Bennett's been out, and that's been a slight issue for them. But they've played so well ahead of them, defended so well as a team ahead of that back 3 that it hasn't had a big impact. Now, can they do that against a team of Tottenham's quality? That's the big question mark for me. They're both at their best, I think, these 2 sides on transitions. So it'll be interesting to see who takes the initiative, who chooses to have the most possession. One stat that caught my eye about Wolves, as good as they've been, they've only beaten 1 team inside the top 15. 15. They've been flat track bullies this season, really. The team they beat, City at the Etihad on the counter. So really, that's the only time that they've beaten anybody of note this season. So that's a word of caution, I guess, on Wolves. I see two very evenly matched teams. You're right about Vertonghen. Think about that matchup with Traore against Vertonghen. Now, if he can shift the ball out of his feet, Traore, and knock it past Vertonghen, I think he has the potential to absolutely destroy him, and Jota as well on the other side, peeling around to trouble Aurier and Sanchez. So look, I think both teams will score, but I'm leaning towards a draw, probably one apiece.
And you, Mark, what about a punting fancy here?
Yeah, very similar, Ali. Both teams to score was my selection here. It's not quite up on the Matchbook site just yet, but it will be before kick-off. And if you look around the high street, it's around 1.75, which I think is absolutely fair when you look at the two strengths of the two teams. Wolves haven't been keeping clean sheets regularly, even despite their positive results. And I look at that Spurs front line and can't see them not scoring, really. And if you look at just raw Premier League stats so far this season, BTTS has copped in 12 of 16 games for each team. That's a 75% hit rate. And we're getting around 1.77, 1.75 for it, which I think is absolutely fair. Outside of that, I think Spurs are slightly too short. I like Wolves to avoid defeat. So Wolves plus half a goal, around the same price as well. They're a very resilient bunch. They've got a game against Besiktas on Thursday night where they can rest and rotate. So unlike most games after the Europa League, they should be coming into this fully prepared and ready to go down to business. And, you mentioned those draws. If only 3 of those draws have been turned into wins, and you look at games against Arsenal, Leicester on the opening day of the season, and there was one other game recently, even Brighton last weekend, actually, just 3 of those draws turned into wins, and they're in the Champions League places. So they're not an easy team to beat, and I think Spurs are going to have it tough this weekend.
Guys, anyone watching live, listening live, feel free to send in any questions for our guests. You can tweet us, you can message us, however you're watching. We're keen to take any questions that you might have. We're moving on now to Manchester United against Everton. Solskjaer against Ferguson would have been quite amazing to be told that this would be a future matchup in the dugout. If you were to tell us that 15 years ago. United 1.84 to win this game, and Everton 4.9. The draw 3.68. Man United minus 3/4 of a goal, 0.75, 2.08, and Everton plus 3/4 of a goal, 1.85-ish. Over 2 3/4 goals, 2.06, and the under 2 3/4 goals, 1.84. Adrian, still no new manager for Everton as we record. Are you as excited about the big dunk bandwagon as everyone else seemed to be last week after their victory against Chelsea?
Well, I co-commentated on the game, and it was really impressive. I liked what I saw of Everton. It literally was go back to basics. Some of the numbers were incredible. Jordan Pickford didn't roll the ball out, didn't throw it out once. He boomed every single pass that he had. The centre halves had about a quarter of the passes that they normally have. It was all about get it forward to Calvert-Lewin, to Richarlison, and let's play from there. And Chelsea couldn't handle it. Now, can Manchester United handle it? I think they're probably slightly better equipped, but that doesn't mean it'll be easy. So yeah, I liked what I saw of them, much better, and I think Everton can cause United problems. And I say that because I've had a little look at United over the course of the season and looked at their poorest performances. Now, their poorest performances were against Palace, they lost at home, Newcastle away, and Villa at home not so long ago when they drew two apiece. Now, they were the 3 matches where the opposition had the lowest number of passes and the highest proportion of long passes. Now, Everton went 29% possession. It was 29% of Everton's passes went long last weekend, which is exceptionally high, and they had under 300 passes. I think 225. So if the pattern continues, United won't like it against Duncan Ferguson's Everton. So for that reason, I think they've got a fighting chance. I'm not going to sit here and say they're going to win at Old Trafford, but stylistically, this United team don't like playing against teams like Everton.
Any interest, Mark, in getting with Everton in a handicap play here or anything else? Where will you be punting on this game?
First of all, that's fantastic research there from Adrian. Really interesting stuff. I looked at the game last week against Chelsea, and we watched the Duncan Ferguson show, the programme notes, the pre-match press conference, post-match, the way he celebrated. It was all about him, really. And there was a bit of a British approach to what they did when 4-4-2. You'd say they added a bit of spirit, bit of work rate, bit of passion. Should really be bare minimum for a Premier League footballer, but it certainly did pay off. They hunted in packs off the ball, made 37 tackles, which was the most they've made an Everton team this decade as well. And I think Schneiderlin and Sidibe were excellent also. But really weirdly, I read a report that Marco Silva discouraged shouting in the dressing room during his Everton stint there. And you can't imagine Ferguson allowing that. He'd be ripping that rule up straight away. And you can see that on the pitch. They're a completely different team, which makes this match really difficult for me to kind of analyse, to know what to expect, because if they do take a similar approach, as Adrian has said, I think they can cause United a few problems. They were notoriously dreadful on the road under Silva, failed to really beat anyone outside of the bottom three, really, and really struggled for clean sheets too. But United also, you look at their record this season, whilst Solskjaer deserved full credit for the wins against Spurs and City in the last week, they don't get results against the kind of teams outside the top bracket. Their record against teams in 6th and below, 3 wins, 5 draws, 4 defeats. And they're odds on to win this match, which doesn't really appeal to me. You look at the tactical makeup of their team, and they do operate best on the transitions, on the counter-attack, as we saw at City. They were happy to kind of allow possession to City, sit deep, keep their shape. They don't really have that opportunity when they come against teams like Everton, who will be happy to kind of play on the counter-attack or play the long ball game themselves. So I think it's a difficult game to analyse. I think the bigger picture really surrounding United and Solskjaer is, whilst those wins were fantastic, it was still their first back-to-back Premier League wins for 9 months, I think. Still just 2 clean sheets in 27 Premier League games going back to February. And I think neck and neck the two teams are in terms of expected goals and underrated sort of or underlying statistics. So I kind of look towards Everton with a half-goal start, but I've actually changed my opinion and gone towards over 2.5 goals, which I think is around 1.85. Just because I think Everton have got the ability in attacking areas, if they do follow the same blueprint against Chelsea, that they can cause United problems. But Anthony Martial, I didn't expect him to be fit for the derby. He's absolutely pivotal. As much as Marcus Rashford's been in fantastic form, United's points per game and goals per game increases dramatically when he's in the team. So I think if United are able to field that front three of Rashford, Martial and Dan James, I think they can cause Everton just as many problems as the Toffees can too. So hopefully a bit of an entertaining game. I think over 2.5 goals at 1.84 is fair enough.
Yeah, everything you guys have said there, that the way which both teams can hurt each other, that certainly leads me to think that goals and potentially another BTTS pick. We had a message during this chat from Get Your Tips Out saying nice Get Your Tips Out from nice... Get your tips out, saying nice BTTS double with Wolves and Spurs. And, for me, that sounds like a pretty tidy option. ACCAs are available on site now with Matchbook, so you can double, triple up your selections if you so desire. But we'll head to Southampton and West Ham. Saints, the home team, 1.95, and West Ham available at 4.0, 3-1 here. Given that performance early on in the week, I don't think there'll be many people touching that, but we'll see. We'll see. It's not my job to have the opinions here. We'll hear what the guys have to say. The draw here, available at 4.1. Southampton on the handicap, minus half a goal at 1.884. And West Ham plus half a goal start, 2.04. Over 3 goals, 2.1. And the under, 1.85. So, Mark, this is going to be quite tense, I think, quite cagey. These are two teams who have found themselves in a tricky spot, it's fair to say, recently, and probably not where they hoped or expected to be. So what are your thoughts on this game at St Mary's?
Yeah, massive match, really. Suggestion is if Pellegrini or if West Ham lose, he's lost his job. And I think if Southampton lose this match, Ralph Hasenhüttl's job is back on the line too. So just a point separating the two teams, Southampton in the relegation zone as well. So, victory really is everything. I just can't have Saints at odds on, I'm afraid. I really like them as a team. I've probably been banging that drum a bit too much, really, since pre-season. But they're so frustrating at the moment. The better team at Newcastle last week, but struggled to deal with Andy Carroll when he came on, and Alex McCarthy makes an error, and once again they've let a Premier League lead slip. It's the 6th time already this season that's happened. Since the start of last season, they've dropped 37 points from leading positions. and under Hasenhüttl, they've lost 5 games from leading positions. You can understand his frustration, understand the frustration from the supporters, because for the most part, I think they've competed pretty well and produced some reasonably good performances, especially recently since the switch to 4-2-2-2. I think they've generated almost 2 expected goals in those 4 games since that switch. And in each game, and Stevens back in defence, Ward-Prowse in the centre of midfield. They're looking good. The balance of the team looks good. But they're just completely lacking in forward areas in terms of finishing ability outside of Danny Ings, and defensively, just too many sloppy individual errors. They're very vulnerable to balls into the back post as well. It's very hard to trust them really at odds-on quotes, despite West Ham's plight. Hasenhüttl said the game against Newcastle was their best away performance of the season, which to me felt a bit like faint praise, because they were superb at Arsenal in their previous away game. But at St Mary's, they're not good enough to support odds-on quotes. I think it's 7 wins in 20 under Hasenhüttl at home, and regardless of West Ham's form, they're just not really for me at odds-on quotes. I'm sure Adrian's got plenty to say about West Ham after seeing them at close quarters on Monday, so I'll leave them to him. But I was favouring a goals approach, but I'll let Adrian sort of talk you through West Ham.
The sort of performance, Adrian, that gets managers sacked, you said early on. What were the hallmarks of that performance?
The hallmarks were laziness. I mean, they didn't press. They did. Arsenal are shaky when they play out from the back, and West Ham was so half-hearted in what they did. One player went, then the 2 behind them stayed put. The whole team was stretched out, and they were very, very easy to play against. I think had West Ham been up against a more informed side, they would have been smashed out of sight, 6 or 7 potentially. They were that bad. Yet I watched them at Chelsea just a few games before, 2 games before. Resilient, compact, showed loads of grit, loads of desire, and beat Chelsea 1-0. So I wouldn't write them off completely. Pellegrini's team have a habit of just pulling it back. Just when you think he's gone, just when you think he's completely lost the dressing room, West Ham pull out a result, and they'll definitely be looking at Southampton at home, who are nervous at home and thinking they can take them. There was nothing to like about West Ham the other day, but Antonio is a threat if he plays. Jack Stevens fills me with no confidence at all at the back for Southampton. He's a player. I think if you study the goals they've conceded of late, almost all of them, unfortunately, have been in and around Jack Stevens. So I think he's a weak link. Statistically, over the last 4 games, since they lost at home to Everton, where they were rubbish, they've been brilliant against Arsenal, Norwich, Watford, Newcastle. Mark's right. I looked at the Times G, ahead in every single game, so they should have won all 4 of the last game. They created more chances than the opposition in all of the last 4 games. They had more shots than the opposition in the last 4 games. So really, I think they'll be disappointed to have 7 points from the last 12. They need this. They need this big time, and with that comes pressure. And I just got a feeling. Everything tells me West Ham aren't good enough, but it would not surprise me if they at least nicked a draw. I'd probably be laying Southampton here.
5:30 p.m. on Saturday, this game. And yeah, as we can tell, tense, evenly poised in many ways. Mark, you mentioned you were potentially going after a goals angle here. Is it pro goals or anti goals?
Pro goals. I know there's probably a feeling that this could be a tense game because 2 teams desperate for the points, but you just look in defensive areas. I think West Ham have got the worst defensive process in the Premier League since Manuel Pellegrini came to the club. Szczesny, so often the saviour really for that back line, he's absent, and I just don't see a way in which Southampton don't score, but at the same time I can't see the Saints keeping a clean sheet. If you look at the 20 St Mary's matches under Ralph Hasenhüttl, 18 of them have seen both teams score and 16 have seen over 2.5 goals. So I think I'd much rather be with goals with that in mind. I think you look at since the start of last season, the 2 teams have combined to play 54 home and away games, kept just 8 clean sheets between them. So I think even West Ham, I know they're missing a couple of players, but they've still got plenty of attacking quality in that team. If they just start to click a little bit, they can cause Saints problems. So I'd rather be of goals, and I think over 2 3/4 goals is probably where I'd be looking for this game, around 1.85.
Okay, good stuff. Well, guys, we've still got a couple more sections. The underdog section, the best bet, of course, any other business. But we are still taking questions as well, anyone listening or watching live. So do get in touch The Ilkan has a question for us. Mark, I think it's something that you've touched on once or twice before. The question is, do you guys handicap differently in weeks where teams are playing after Champions or Europa League action? You certainly, Mark, will often in your analysis of games, your previews of games, mention travel, mention not much time between games. That is something that you take pretty seriously from a punting perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've got a couple of decent occasions this weekend in the Championship, which are obviously not outside the Champions League and Europa League, where teams are playing on Wednesday night and playing teams who played on Tuesday night. And I think, just an extra day's rest in a game like that, and especially in the Championship season, when matches come thick and fast, it can make all the difference, because it's not just rest and recuperation, it's also preparation and the amount of time these teams have on the training paddock, not just to hone their own skills, but also look at their own ways in which to combat the opposition. It all plays a part, and especially in the lower leagues when travel isn't quite as glamorous, especially if you look down to, say, League One and League Two, teams who might be up in, I think Exeter up in Hartlepool at the FA Cup in midweek, have to come back to Exeter, and then they go to Salford again this weekend. That's something to bear in mind, because they're probably spending long hours on a coach, and especially here in Europe, when teams do come off long away trips, especially to Eastern Europe or the likes of Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan and Europa League, it has to play a part. I know some of these big teams are able to rest and rotate their numbers because they've already qualified or whatnot, but it has to play a part, because they're going through different time zones, and it takes time to adjust. So, I mean, Adrian can probably give us a better picture as to what a life of the Premier League footballer is on the roads. But for me, it's something to definitely key into your thinking and your pricing too.
Yeah, on that. I mean, more so my time as a football league player, really, because you don't fly, you get the bus most of the time. I mean, occasionally you might fly if you were going right to the north from the south, but yeah, long hours. I spent a lone spell with Carlisle, and every road trip we had was an absolute killer. And if you had to back to back, then it would take it out of your legs. And
is it in the legs, Adrian? Is that, as soon as the match starts, are you feeling I'm 20% off here, or is it as the game develops? Is it more to do with issues towards the end of games? How would you sum it up, I guess, for those of us who haven't felt?
You just don't feel as sharp sometimes. Modern day players are looked after much better than we were in the mid-90s onwards. But yeah, you got masseurs on hand and stuff now. But it's certainly a hindrance. Sometimes, I would have gone out there onto the pitch just feeling a little bit heavy-legged before you've even kicked a ball, and you sort of work your way into the game. So that's a great pick on Exeter. 2 back-to-back trips north from Devon. It has to be a massive negative for them.
It's great that Matchbook provide a masseur for us as well on this podcast, just to keep us loose, keep the muscles fresh, both before and after the pod. Certainly in these Champions League weeks, Mark, where you are being worked very hard on multiple Matchbook podcasts. Let's go for our underdog section, and I'm excited about it because last week we'd already spoken about Bayern-Gladbach. It was one of the games we previewed. It was such a big game, with Gladbach leading the Bundesliga as they approached the end of the first half of the campaign. And we liked Gladbach so much that they were instantly also our most fancied long shot last week. So I'm interested to see what you guys have come up with this week, because the game, I suppose, here is, or the deal is, I'm giving you a mythical £10 free bet. You'll get your money back if you lose. So there's really no drama either way, nothing to lose. But you do have to make it a long shot. You have to make it interesting. So, Adrian, what have you picked out for us this week?
Yeah, I'm gonna speculate on Bristol Rovers this weekend. They travel
Look at that
road, and Ipswich were knocked out of the FA Cup in midweek. Paul Lambert described it as the worst performance of his reign. And I looked into it, and Ipswich, even though they're bang in the hunt for automatic promotion, the last time they won at home was September. I mean, It's nearly Christmas. So for them to be odds on, which they are, ahead of this game, I think is way too short. James Norwood, the star man for them, had groin surgery. He's feeling his way back in. He's not looking as sharp right now as he was. And Bristol Rovers, although they leak goals, they're always capable of scoring goals. They've got Johnson, Clarke, Harris back fit and available. He's a very good front man at this level. And they've got 4 away wins, Bristol Rovers, this season. Only 2 teams in League One have more than that. So it just stands out to me as a possible upset. I can't say it's a certainty by any stretch of the imagination, but at 4.6, which is around 7-2, I think Bristol Rovers offer decent value this weekend.
They're very, very capable of frustrating opposition and opposition fans as well. Bristol Rovers are very difficult to play against. They are defensive-minded, I would say, in their outlook and quite direct. But what people maybe haven't realised about Ipswich is that they are very direct as well. I was speaking to a bit of a name drop, but Gareth Ainsworth, the Wycombe manager, who I was working with last weekend, and he said, people have Wycombe down as this uber long ball team, but when they played Ipswich played more long balls. They're right at the top if you look on stats websites. Long balls per game, 88, which is the 3rd most in the league. So it's actually similar styles going head to head here, but in many ways, Bristol Rovers feel like they play that style better. They almost suit that style a bit more. So I'm all in on that. That had actually I'd flagged that up as well in my own preview this weekend. Mark, what about you? Another underdog, another outside chance bet. You've been doing quite well on these recently.
Yeah, I'm going to stay in League One while you guys are as well, because Sunderland are in an awful mess at the moment. They were odds on earlier this week. The market's moved against them, unsurprisingly. They're hosting Blackpool. I think Blackpool have got a great chance here, around 3-1. I think they're going great guns at the moment. Very much under the radar, you could say, under Simon Grayson. Pretty unfashionable, pretty uninspiring, safety first football. But they let the stabilisers off last weekend in the derby against Fleetwood. Won that game comfortably. Nandule back fit and firing, leading the line, which is obviously quite key for them. And they've only lost 3 times under Grayson in the league this season, only once away as well. So I think they'll be looking at this game as very much winnable, because I was probably one of the many people who felt the change in management was what Sunderland required. Was quite keen to see how Phil Parkinson would do. Expected him to do much better than he has, but he's already been basically given the dreaded vote of confidence. 2 wins from 12. They came against teams in 20th and 22nd. Lost 7 games, fallen to 11th in the league, exited all 3 cup competitions. And in his 7 league games, they've created 26 chances compared to 48 in Jack Ross's last 3. He bizarrely went 5 at the back against Gillingham last week. Benched his best player in Aidan McGeady and Chris Maguire also. So, it's no wonder really that they're not forging any sort of serious shots on target or efforts at goal really. So, and just to bring things full circle, Simon Grayson going back to the Stadium of Light for the first time since he was sacked. So, I think it's all set up for a bit of an away upset there.
Yeah, I mean the anger being aimed at both Phil Parkinson, but also the board at Sunderland by their fans, understandable, because this is the lowest point certainly in their modern history, potentially ever in the club. And that's the sort of thing where if Blackpool were to take the lead in that game, the anger being transmitted from the fans onto the pitch, it's not just Sunderland fans, but actually happens across the EFL. It rarely seems to motivate players. It rarely seems to G them up. That pure anger and disappointment. So if Blackpool were to go ahead in the first half here, I would say I would not expect Sunderland necessarily to come back into that one. So the good news is that although it's entirely mythical for you guys, the offer of a £10 free bet is not mythical for anyone listening or watching who doesn't already have a Matchbook account, because Matchbook are offering a £10 bonus, your money back up to £10 if your first bet loses. This is for over 18s, of course. If you want all of the T's and C's, you can head to offer.matchbook.com to check those out, to sign up and get involved with that offer. Whether you like Bristol Rovers or Blackpool or something of your own, get involved this weekend on the Matchbook site. Any other business, gents, is what we're going with now. Anything else from across the world of football this weekend that's caught your eye, starting with you, Mark O'Hare?
Yeah, I've got 2. So in Italy, I think over 2.5 goals should cop quite comfortably in Bologna-Atalanta on Sunday. Sinisa Mihailovic back on the Bologna bench last weekend after his chemotherapy treatment, which was great to see. His team have really retain their exciting attacking approach, even in his absence. They might be in the bottom half, but they are creating plenty of chances, and they're coming up against Italy's best attacking team. So Atalanta faced a really difficult must-win game in Ukraine on Wednesday night, so you can't expect them to be at full tilt, especially in defensive areas where they were tested. They've only kept 2 clean sheets this season in Serie A anyway, so it has a bit of a shootout feel really for me. If you look at the stats, 23 of their combined 30 games have featured at least 3 goals. 53% have gone over 3.5, and 77% saw both teams score as well. So I like that. And then also in Spain, Athletic Bilbao are too big at 1.74, 1.75-ish against Eibar. They've been a team absolutely transformed under Gaisca Caradano, especially at San Mamés. 14 wins, 5 draws, 1 defeat at home. That's a 70% win ratio, 11 clean sheets and 20 as well. Things going very difficult for Eibar this season. They were quite unfortunate last weekend against Getafe, but they've really missed 3 key players that were sold in the summer. Jean Jordan, Ruben Pena and Marcus Arella. Lost 9 of 15 this year, 4 on a spin they've lost as well. Were thrashed at Sociedad in the other Basque derby recently. Their away record is poor, their underlying data is poor, and it's looking very bleak for them at the moment. So I expect Athletic to win, and I think they should be much shorter than the current advertised price.
Adrian Clarke, any other business?
Yeah, the one that's caught my eye is in League Two, Newport against Stevenage. I mean, it has 0-0 or 1-0 written all over it. Stevenage have only scored 4 away goals all season, which is just ridiculous, really. And they've had 3 goalless draws in a row. Newport, they've only scored more than 1 goal in 2 of 10 home games. The other 8 have been either none or 1. So the eye catcher for me is under 2.25 goals. I think it offers some really good value. I think it's around about 1.8 something at the moment. So, and you get your money back if there's under 2.5 scored. So yeah, Newport versus Stevenage. Don't think it's going to be very exciting. I would be loading on the under 2.25.
We're all Football League fans between the 3 of us, right? And if we're all not on the 0-0 this weekend at Newport Stevenage, there's something wrong with us.
I commented last week when I realised it was 3 0-0s in a row that they're taking that Sunday League cliche. It's still 0-0, lads, to the level there. I would thank you for that. All that's left is for me to ask you, out of all the things we discussed, what do you think is your best bet this weekend? Adrian, you kick us off here.
I'm quite confident on the Newport Stevenage, but do you know what? It hurts me to say it, but City to win, and probably with an over 2.5 goals, or even the City half-time, full-time that I mentioned earlier. That's the one I'm most confident about.
And you, Mark?
Yeah, it would be either of those 2 European games, but I'll go with Athletic Bilbao, around 1.75-ish to beat Eibar on Saturday. Really should be a lot shorter. Eibar in a very poor place right now, and Athletic boast a 70% win ratio at home under Gaisca Caratano. They just get the job done unfussily, and I think they'll do so again this weekend.
Well, great. Thank you both so much. Mark, we're putting you on ice now after a busy week, Champions League action, as well as this. Adrian, I hope that the Arsenal-Man City game is not too much of a tough watch, although you yourself don't sound too confident. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you for listening to the Matchbook Weekend Football Pod. We hope all of your weekend fancies, all of your punts go well. And we just remind you to take, or make use rather, of a couple of things on the Matchbook site, both the new option of ACCAs, of accumulators, any multiples that you fancy, you can do that on the Matchbook site. But also, if you haven't signed up to an account, the £10 risk-free bet. You can find all the terms and conditions on offer.matchbook.com. We're having a small break next week. Too many Christmas parties, I think, for all of us. But we'll be back again with a couple of podcasts around the busy Christmas period. We've got Boxing Day action, New Year's Day, etc. So we'll be with you throughout that. And we thank you, as always, for listening and watching to the Matchbook Weekend Football Podcast.